Hey, what's up, guys? All right, so I'm just trying to fix this. Woo! There is so much going on. I'm having a hard time keeping up. With all due honesty, you know, I don't have a guest today. I'm just kind of spitballing here. There's a lot happening in the world today. If you're not paying attention, you know, Canada and the United States are currently having this trade discussion as it relates to tariffs and what that could potentially mean. I'm trying to get a better understanding of like how this could ultimately impact our economy. And one of the things that I did is I did some homework on just have we done stuff like this before? And it looks like the first Trump administration did something similar to this. And the reason why I'm interested in this is because I do have interest in the economy and just general politics and global politics and whatnot. But what I'm trying to figure out is like there's a lot of rhetoric on both sides, from the Republicans and from the Democrats as to whether this is a good idea, whether this is a bad idea. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And there's definitely arguments to be had on both sides of this issue. And the question is to I don't even know what the question is. That maybe that's the problem. Part of the problem, I don't even know what question to even ask in the first place. So I did some homework on this. The Trump administration did something similar in 2018, where they imposed some tariffs on, it looks like, steel and aluminum, as well as some additional consumer goods. And, the idea here at this time, again, my understanding is that a lot of this was done based on the implication that Chinese metals were coming in through Canada, and that was a problem. Now, at this time, this was considered a national security justification, right? Because they were really looking to focus on developing local metals, specifically steel and aluminum production here in the United States. I don't know. I probably could do a quick search on that, what that's looking like. But ultimately, this was done before. Something similar was done like this before, and they were able to negotiate through this. What's interesting is that I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure of a lot of stuff. I'm not sure if we're, if this is a justified response. I mean, the way that it's being addressed now is it has to do with fentanyl coming into the United States and finding a way to prevent fentanyl from coming into the U.S. And so, I mean, if that is indeed the case, right? If this is a negotiating tactic to stop fentanyl from coming into the United States, then I don't understand. Like, maybe the request for what to do about that is what's causing the issue. So, why wouldn't Canada address that? If that's something that would be a concern on both sides, right? Like, we need to be more cautious about anyone crossing north into Canada. They need to be more cautious about people coming south into the United States, or drugs trafficking between both countries. Like, I don't understand clearly why that is not being addressed. If that is indeed the issue, then if Canada were to provide some kind of like, hey, we're going to take action to do this, then that I guess is the argument here, right? At least that the administration is making, that there is a fentanyl issue, and that there have been sort of unfair. It's not been an even relationship between Canada and the United States, both economically, militarily, all that good stuff. And I know there's been, Trump says stuff like, Canada will be the 51st state, and so on and so forth. it's hard to know because he says a lot of stuff, and sometimes I feel like he says stuff to razz people or to get a reaction from people. Let me give you an example. So, like, everyone's in an uproar, which I totally understand about, Donald Trump talking about the Gaza Strip, turning the Gaza Strip into like this sort of opulent location and destination and developing it and all that good stuff, and that he's going to just take it and so on and so forth. And I mean, I don't know how. I don't know how he could possibly do that without there being any significant backlash, both from the Middle Eastern community, specifically the Arabic community, and the Western community. Like, I think there would be too many countries on the West that would be like, "That's ridiculous. You can't just do that," right? So I don't, and I know he's talking about it as if, oh, it's just going to happen. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Like, and I kind of suspected that this might happen. I was, when I first heard that, I was like, there's no way he's gonna try to do that. That's crazy. That's just nuts. But I wonder if that's like crazy like a fox type of thing. And hear me out. And I'm not a fan of Trump, but he's used to negotiating stuff, and I wonder if this was a play to get the Arabic nations to be like, wait, no, Trump, you're not going to do that to Gaza. Those are our people. Like, we're not going to let you do that, and then gets them to step up to do something. And lo and behold, I was just reading an article the other day that the Arabic nations are all getting together to address the Gaza Strip, to redevelop it, and to apply aid and resolve the destruction and devastation that's there. Like, they're doing the thing that I thought he might be trying to do. So then I was starting to wonder. I'm like, well, maybe this whole Gaza Strip thing wasn't even a real thing. It was just a tactic to get the other nations to that are supportive of Gaza, that are in the region, to be like, no, Donald Trump, you're not going to do that. We're going if anyone's going to do that, we're going to do that. So we're going to get all of our resources, and we're going to go in there and redevelop the Gaza Strip, and make it a sovereign nation or whatever the case may be. And they're going to get more involved, because the biggest challenge, I don't say the biggest challenge, I would say one of the challenges with the Gaza Strip is how much involvement are the other nations having as it relates to the Gaza Strip. Obviously, there's all kinds of challenges with Israel and its relationship with the Gaza Strip. Again, there are arguments on the Israeli side. There are arguments against the Israelis' position on it. I mean, I think that this whole scenario is going to require sort of a third party to come in and mediate, because they're not going to be able to talk to each other. They don't even see each other as real people anymore. They are such enemies that the only way that you're going to be able to get anything resolved between the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the Israelis is to have a third party basically come in and say, hey, we're going to need to mediate this on your behalf, because you guys can't even have a conversation with each other. I mean, it just seems like the Israelis don't see the Palestinians as like real people, and the Palestinians don't see Israelis as real people, and everyone hates each other so much that they can't even have a conversation. So I do think it's going to require a third party mediation. I mean, is the United States the right third party? I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think so. I don't think so. And I do. When I saw that article, I was like, oh my God, the other Arabic nations in the area, and maybe they're not all Arabic, but Egypt and Jordan I think it's Egypt, Jordan, Iran, just other nations that are sort of in the vicinity are talking about, hey, they are going to start putting aid together to kind of help provide, I guess you got a reprise for the Palestinians. Now, it is going to require the Israelis to essentially stop doing whatever the hell they're doing, and allow for some semblance of a conversation to happen. And I'm hoping that does happen. It is going to be difficult because I do know that there is a lot of animosity between the Israelis and a lot of the other Arabic nations that are in the area. Some of that, I'm sure, has to do with like religious differences. Some of that is also cultural. So I don't know what the answer is there. But I guess my point is, I'm kind of going on a tangent here. Donald Trump makes this crazy announcement about turning Gaza Strip into this oasis, and all of a sudden, we're getting the other nations that are in the area talking about, hey, no, you're not going to do that. We're going to take care of our own people. And I wonder if that was his plan in the first place. Like, was that the plan in the first place was just to get these other nations to kind of step up, because they haven't been. They've been kind of like neutral, not in agreement, but not really participatory. So I found that to be really interesting, and then that starts to get me thinking about like some of the other things that he's doing, and whether or not he's leveraging his sort of some of his insane rhetoric for the purposes of just making something a little bit more moderate sound like it makes more sense. Like, it's the idea that, like, so we do this in, it's not in negotiating in real estate, right? So when I negotiate with, in a commercial real estate deal, it's not unusual to anchor, right? Where you go and you got a $5 million project, and that's for sale. And let's say I'm representing the buy side, and we go in and we're like, hey, the offer that the buyer is making is for 3.8 million, right, on a $5 million deal. And of course, the seller's going to be like, hell no, there's no way I'm going to do that. It's crazy, right? That's way too low. So $1.2 million off base, right? So the idea here is that, if they come back, if they say, oh no, maybe we'll go down $200,000, 4.8, right? But then if the response then is, well, what if we do, 4.4, right? Well, now 4.4 sounds way better than the 3.8 that was offered, right? And the idea is that there's a psychology behind anchoring really low or anchoring really high, so that if something that would have been the first offer, so if the 4.4 would have been the first offer, that may have sounded ridiculous, but now we got to move from 4.4 to somewhere between 4.4 and 5 million, and maybe we get not as we don't get as good of a deal because we didn't anchor low enough. Now you got to be careful with that, because obviously if you anchor too low, there's a whole other conversation. But if you anchor too low, then the seller's just like, I'm not even gonna have a conversation with you. You're ridiculous, right? So you can completely turn off the deal altogether. So part of that deal making process is identifying, like, where can you make an offer that's low enough that the seller's like, I'll at least counter this, but this is way off base, versus I'm not even having a conversation with you. So this idea of anchoring is actually a pretty powerful tool in the negotiating space. I say negotiating space as if it's a specific space, but I mean in negotiations in general, right? This idea of negotiating. So I wonder if part of what he's doing as a negotiating tactic is anchoring these sort of crazy ideas so that he can get a more moderate idea passed. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, or get people to think differently about the thing that he's trying to get through. So, like, if he were to say, okay, let's go back to Gaza, which I know is super inflammatory and it's tough to talk about, but I think this is a good example, right? let's say, for example, he were to talk to the Arab nations that are there and say, "Hey, listen, I think what would be best for the area is for you guys to come together and invest into Gaza and help to redevelop that state." And really, we will then work towards making it officially a state, right? Giving it some kind of a, making it officially a nation in the world, right? Or maybe it ties into another nation or something. Like, we'll figure that out. And if that's something that he doesn't think is going to happen, because maybe they don't really have a ton of motivation to do that, or whatever the case may be, right? They're just indifferent about it, or he just doesn't feel like that's a priority for them. Well, by saying he's going to do that, and he's just going to take this state and just turn it into the whatever he wants, like, now the Arab nations are like, wait, we're not going to let you do that. No, no, no. We're going to do that. And then now, like, I don't know if you guys have, I don't know if that tracks, but I feel like that tracks. I feel like that's a thing. Like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I could totally see that being a negotiating tactic. And that's kind of what he's doing with some of the other stuff that he has in place. Now, listen, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that he's got in place, or a lot of things that he's doing. But there's a number of things that I'm like, I'm kind of in a wait and see. I'm kind of in a wait and see position. I'm not sure. Tariffs, for example, I don't. I can see how there can be some negative impacts there. The question is are those going to be long-term negative impacts or short-term negative impacts? And for our economy, I mean, even short-term is going to be painful, because that means Americans are going to have to, the likelihood is that's going to increase pricing in a few places, and for goods and stuff like that are coming into the nation, that are coming into the country. So it's going to be more. It's going to get more expensive before it gets cheaper. And when I say cheaper, I don't necessarily mean that prices are going to go down. I guess the question is that our wages going to be able to come up, so that if it costs 20% more for goods, are we making that up with wages? Because now the trade deficit, or rather the tariffs, have caused businesses to come here to generate jobs, and hopefully those jobs are decent paying jobs, and people are able to, you know, this was really interesting to me, because I really thought that there was no chance we could bring manufacturing back to the United States. And I'm still very skeptical about that, because it's hard for us to compete against other nations. I mean, when we're trying to compete against China, when we're trying to compete against Mexico, like, our economy is so expensive, it's hard to compete against the wages that someone can get paid in Mexico to live a similar lifestyle. And that's assuming they live a similar lifestyle, which oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes they live still below the poverty line. They're just happy to have a job, so their wages are even lower. But even if you were to account for, like, similar lifestyles in Mexico versus in the United States, like, the cost of living in a similar size house, with your same types of food and similar cars, and it's not going to necessarily be as safe, but, like, the lifestyle is essentially similar. Like, to do that in Mexico, it's way cheaper than it is to do it in the United States. So, like, if you needed to pay somebody to and give them that lifestyle in Mexico, you wouldn't have to pay them the same wage that you'd have to pay them in the United States. And that's because we have a bunch of different things in place, the infrastructure, our tax structure, there's all kinds of reasons for that. But my point is that when we're trying to compete against another nation, like, it's like, from a workforce perspective, it is near impossible for us to be able to compete, because we're just expensive, right? American labor is expensive compared to other labor in the world. So, tariffs is a way to kind of even the game. The question is whether or not it's actually going to work. I mean, I was looking at some data for the tariffs that were put in 2017, and honestly, and those are the ones that were put on Canada, for example. And I know he put some other tariffs in place, but I was just kind of trying to get a sense of like what the economy looked like prior to and after. And um, there's some slight differences in how the economy behaved. But there were some interesting things that happened here, like from 2017 to 2019, right? The difference in the GDP was like 0.1%. So it was slightly lower after those tariffs were put in place. Employment went down, right? It went down from 4.1 to 3.5. The inflation rate went down from 2.1 to 1.8. The household median income went from $62,000 to $68,000, right? The poverty rate went down from 12% to 10.5%, right? The stock market performance went from positive 19% in 2017 to positive 28.9% in 2019. Now, the budget deficit definitely went up. So we definitely had a bigger budget deficit there. Like we went from essentially a deficit of 665 billion to almost $1 trillion. So, and I don't know where that came from. But obviously that's a problem in and of itself. But all of the other sort of indicators of the economy suggest that in 2018, when the tariffs were put in place, you would figure that in 2019 you would start seeing some of the impact of those tariffs put in place, and it looked like the economy got better. So I don't know. I mean, I'm saying, like, I understand the argument about like it's going to make things more expensive and it's going to have a negative. It could have a negative impact, and it will likely have a negative impact. Is that negative impact going to be short lived, or is that going to be like a long term thing? And that's what I wish there was a way to have a crystal ball about that, but there's not. Like I feel like there's too many factors for anyone to reasonably predict the way this is going to play out. So that's why I'm in a wait and see kind of situation. I don't know what that's going to look like, and I don't want to preemptively say, Trump bad for making this decision. I don't know that this is the wrong decision. I don't know if it's the right decision either. So I'm going to wait and see. There are obviously a lot of executive orders that he has in place, and some of them, I mean, weren't terrible. And some of them I just didn't really understand. But I don't understand like what his purpose or what his goal is, or whatever the case may be. But I here's the thing that I'm going to say. It is not business as usual. I think we can all agree on that. It is not business as usual. So the very fact that it's not business as usual, I think I like that it's not business as usual. So I think this is really good in my opinion, like because it's getting more people involved in like the politics of our country. And this is really an important thing. I keep hearing people say like, oh, you can't really talk about religion and politics with people. And I don't find that to be the case. I don't know about you guys. I know that there's always going to be that person that is just, really kind of on the left or on the right, or that person that's really maybe super religious or maybe hyper secular or whatever the case. But the vast majority of people, I mean, at least the people that I talk to, I mean, the vast majority of people are fine to have those conversations. I don't understand why there's this sort of like thing that you can't have a conversation about politics and religion. Let's think about this for a second, right? Politics and religion are probably the two of the most important, arguably two of the most important things that we should be talking about, right? Like you're talking about like your spiritual like perspective Like this is sort of a metaphysical conversation about like what is our place here in the world, right? And religion kind of addresses some of that. You know, and you don't have to necessarily be religious to have conversations about it, but just to have this metaphysical conversation about like what is God, what is our purpose, why are we here, like why should we connect with others, like what is it, what is the meaning of life, kind of a deal. And that's a lot of what religion is about, right? It's just conversation about like what is the meaning of life, and different people, different religions have different perspectives on that. Why would you not want to have a conversation about that? That seems totally reasonable, to have a conversation on like what is the meaning of life, and what is your perspective on the meaning of life, and here's my perspective on them, and what's their perspective on the meaning of life. Like we should have this conversation. It seems like a really important conversation to have. Why would you not want to have that conversation with another person? So I find whenever I have conversations with people, I like to have these conversations. I don't really find people are like super ridiculous about having these conversations. People have their ideas and opinions, and I respect where they're coming from as long as they respect where I'm coming from, and we can have a discourse. And sometimes my mind changes. It's not often, but sometimes someone says something like, "Oh, you know what? I hadn't considered that." And I feel like I have conversations with people that they also kind of do the same. That, it's rare because most people have a pretty good idea. I wouldn't say most people, but a lot of people have a really good idea of kind of where they are spiritually, and they're following a particular doctrine or a particular religion, and they've kind of adopted that, and that's where they're at. But that doesn't mean like your mind can't change about some perspective on a thing as it relates to religion. And it doesn't mean if you change your perspective that you're all automatically changing your religion, your religious beliefs. It's just, hey, my perspective has adjusted. There's new information that I didn't realize before, that I didn't consider, that now we're having a better conversation. Totally reasonable. I don't know why that's not a reasonable thing. Why someone would say having a conversation about religion is nonsensical. To me, it's the most sensible thing to have. Like you need to have a conversation about like why are we here? Like really important conversation. So politics, in my view, like a lot of people don't want to talk about politics, but politics is like, okay, well, how are we going to navigate all of us being here together? That's what politics is essentially, right? Is governance. Is talking about how are we going to like navigate all of us, right? Doing all of this together. Like it started with like groups and then tribes, right? And then the tribes created like their own governance of rules of how they would operate so they could survive. And then those tribes just got bigger and turned into, essentially nations. And that's kind of where we're at now. And now we're having global politics, which is trying to figure out like how do we do this as a world? Like, why would you not want to have a conversation about that? Like, there may be something that, like, if you have a particular view on a thing and my view is different, like, we should probably hash that out, discuss it, and the best ideas, like, let's allow the best ideas to rise to the top, hopefully, and figure that out. And sometimes nobody knows what the best idea is, and that's okay. Like, my goodness, be okay with like, hey, my idea may not be the best idea, but we don't know what idea is the best idea. So let's talk it out. Let's test some things and see what goes on. So I don't know. I feel like politics and religion are really important topics to talk about. I feel like they're two of the most important topics to talk about. So and I would challenge anyone to go around in their sphere of influence, the people that they know, and talk to them about religion and politics, and kind of see where they're at and see how they feel. Like this whole division between like Democrats and Republicans, like I'm sure it exists somewhere, but I see it in this little box all the time. I don't really see it in my day to day. I'm not saying that there aren't um, arguments or disputes to be had between right and left, but I don't I don't walk around seeing everything on in my little box, right? I don't see that in my real world. And maybe I'm just sheltered in the Orlando area, Central Florida. But I don't feel like I am. I feel like, this area has a pretty diversified community age wise, demographic wise, like just, I mean, I feel like it's become a pretty diverse community. And we're seeing a good mix of people here from all different walks of life. I mean, most of the people who live here are not from here. They're from some other place. So, I don't know. I don't necessarily see that division in my day to day. So I guess I want to I challenge the idea that there is as much division as we're hearing about. I mean, I do talk to my friends who I have friends who believe that there's this division that exists. But then when I ask them, well, where are you seeing that in your life? They don't typically have an answer. They're like, oh, well, we see it on the news and we see it on social media. I'm like, yeah, exactly. You see it on the news and you see it in your little box. But where are you seeing that in your day to day? Because at the end of the day, most people are just trying to fucking work. They're just trying to get through they're just trying to get to the end of the day so they can get to the weekend or whatever. Like I want to just kind of get through my work. I want to pay my bills and leave me the fuck alone. Like I mean, that's how most people are. You know what I mean? So like I don't think there's not a lot of there's not enough energy. I'm trying to get through life. I don't have the energy to be fighting with everybody. You know what I mean? So I feel like that exists. There is sort of certainly groups of people that behave that way. I wouldn't dispute that, but I don't know that it's as divisive. Like our country's as divided as people as what we see the box says it is. I don't see that. I think people are just anxious about what's going on. People have their ideas about why agree or disagree about what the president's doing, what the administration's doing, all that good stuff. And those are all legitimate. But, there's some things that are conceptually, they make sense to me. Like this whole idea of Elon Musk and Doge and coming in to, identify where there may be wasteful spending. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have I don't know. That seems like a good idea to have a, you know, a department that is specifically looking for that. And whether Elon Musk is elected or not elected, like, what does that fucking matter? Like, most like the vast majority of the people that are in federal government are not elected officials. They're, you know, most of them are hired. So I don't understand. Like, why is that relevant? And, you know, whether he has top secret clearances and stuff like Elon Musk has I mean, this is a guy that, I mean, he runs SpaceX and specifically has like high top level military contracts with the federal government as it relates to that. I'm sure he has the appropriate top secret clearances. I would be hard pressed. I would be I would be so surprised. I would be just incredibly surprised if Elon Musk does not have some kind of top secret clearance just because of his role as it relates to SpaceX and even the Boring Company potentially, right? Like with the federal like I don't like I would be really surprised if he didn't have some kind of clearances in place. So I mean, he already has a working relationship with the federal government at the highest levels. Like this is not like he's the only real option for space travel right now. Like people I mean, this idea that there's he's going to take contracts from other agencies. Like there's no one else who has. I guess you could argue that there may be some other people. So I guess that's a reasonable argument. You can say, oh well, the Blue Origins and Virgin is working on like Richard Branson is working on stuff, and I guess there's arguments there. So you know what, I'm not gonna go in that direction, but I do feel like he's probably got some secret some kind of clearances working at that level with the government. So, and I feel like that could be, and that's the kind of thing that can just be assigned to him. So I don't know. That seems weird to me. Anyways, but I mean, conceptually, having a department like Doge go into the federal government and look for things that are wasteful. I mean, to me that seems like it's totally reasonable. Um, I guess the how is the thing that I guess people are not happy with, like the way in which he's doing it or what have you. I mean, look, you know, we've been doing it the government way for a long time, and it's not been working. So I think doing it the way a corporation might come and approach it, which is, it seems like that's the way Elon Musk is kind of approaching it. Like if it was a corporation, I mean, the other way hasn't been working. Like there's not been a like we know that there's waste in the government. We know that exists. We don't know where it is, but we know that it exists. I mean, there's just $37 trillion in a deficit. There's got to be a waste in there. Has to be. There's just too much money being spent for there not to be waste in there, right? So the question then becomes, well, where is it, and why have we like identified it to date? There's no reason why we couldn't have identified it before, but nobody has. So, you know, this is one of those scenarios where like we have to address that immediately, because if we don't address that, then that puts the dollar in jeopardy over time, because there's only so much debt that we can get into before the rest of the world is like, yeah, your money's no good here, right? There's only so much we could do with that. So we have to figure that out. Like that is a uh, that is I mean, such a critical element for our country. Like we got to figure that out. Like why wouldn't we want to figure that out? And clearly, the way that we've done it before has not been successful. So again, I'm in a wait and see kind of position on that. I'm like, you know what? We've been talking about going into and balancing the budget and trying to be better with wasteful spending and stuff like that, and not a single president administration has done a good job with that. I mean, we haven't had a balanced budget since Bill Clinton. That's a long time. That's like 24 25 years, something like that. It's crazy. It's nuts. So like we got to fix that problem, because I mean, we can't just like spend our way into oblivion. So I'm in a wait and see for that. I don't know about you guys, but I'm totally in a wait and see position for that. I don't have as much concern about Elon Musk and what his intentions are. Um, I mean, I've not seen. While I don't necessarily like the way that he treats employees, because obviously we've seen some ways that he has sort of just, I guess I would say, inappropriate expectations with how employees should be performing. I don't know that I've necessarily seen anything that would suggest that he's a bad actor, right? In this whole scenario, like, does he have nefarious intentions? I don't know that I've seen uh, like I don't necessarily care for his position on how he has viewed or dealt with employees in the past, because I think he just has inappropriate expectations for that. But that doesn't necessarily make him a bad actor. It just makes him not the greatest employer. But as far as I can tell, I mean, he's developing businesses and technologies that nobody else has been able to keep up with, for a number of different industries, and doing that here in the United States. And you know, all of it has been benefiting the United States. So I don't I and then the argument of, oh well, he wants to take over more and own, and it's possible. I mean, maybe he's Darth Vader and he just wants more power and money, but he's the richest dude in the world. Like he certainly doesn't need it. He's got it. Like he's already there. Like he's there. Like I I don't know. You'd have to ascribe like a Darth Vader type of like mentality to that, and he's just trying to get more power, which is possible, but I don't see that anywhere else. So maybe you guys can enlighten me on that because maybe there is something I'm missing, but I don't see anywhere where he's behaving in a manner where he's trying to acquire power, like a power grab or something like that, like where he has nefarious intentions. He strikes me as the kind of person that seems like he wants to make things better. Like he's trying to get us to Mars, which that's not a profitable endeavor. Like by the time we get there and there's any profit to be made from having traveled to Mars, like I mean, I want you to think about this. Like he's probably going to be gone. He's going to be dead. Like even if we were to get to Mars tomorrow, like to turn that into some kind of a business endeavor, like that's going to take decades. I mean, I don't know that he'll see that. I mean, maybe, but I mean, I don't know that profit could be the motivation for that because that doesn't seem like a profitable endeavor, right? That's I want to change the world type of thing. I want to have an impact in human civilization kind of thing. Like that doesn't sound like a profiteering endeavor. Like if you were an investor and Elon said to you, "Hey, I want to go to Mars, and we may not get there for another 10 years, and then once we get there, we're going to then need another influx of investment dollars because for us to even be able to survive on Mars requires just a ton of infrastructure, which is going to be terribly expensive. And then we might be in a position to potentially, let's say, mine Mars. Let's say, I mean, you know how long it takes for us to do that on Earth, and we don't have any of the challenges that we're going to be running into on Mars, and then to be able to transport all that stuff, like there's no way that that's like I want to do this for profit. Like that is like I want to impact civilization and I got to figure out a way to do that and hope that people are going to invest in this idea so that we can make something like this happen. So I don't that doesn't sound like anything. I mean, I guess you could argue Tesla, the Boring Company, but I don't know how profitable that one is. So I just, I've not seen anything. So I'd be interested if you guys have any specific, you know, anything that's specific that you can kind of showcase that, hey, look, this Elon Musk is clearly Darth Vader, and this is how, right? This is why I think he's Darth Vader. I mean, just the argument that he's a billionaire, that's not enough. Like he earned that. Like it's not he was given that money. He earned that money. He built that billionaire status, trillion, whatever he is. Like he built that. So like I don't know. I guess I'd want to see where are you seeing him as like Darth Vader? I don't, because that's kind of what I'm kind of getting from the argument against Elon Musk being a part of this, right? So anyways, I guess there's just so much happening, and I don't know that anyone knows what the outcomes are, and everyone's jumping to all these crazy conclusions as to what is going to happen and like who all the players are and what their intentions are and all that. So I don't know that I don't know that there's enough information to know the answers to the things that people are talking about. Are the, you know, are these tariffs, are they going to be positively impactful over time or negatively impactful over time? I mean, there's too many dynamic factors to know the answer to that. I can understand why someone would say, oh, this is going to cause economic disruption. I totally get that. Right. And, the people that are on the other side of that are saying, yes, there is going to be economic disruption. And their argument is that the end result is going to end in people making more money, like Americans making more money and being able to overcome those economic disruptions because the individual like median income is going to go up, like better jobs are going to be here, and we're going to be able to have a lot of the things that Europe has in terms of like you know uh, maybe some of the social benefits, if that's something that people end up deciding they want, or whatever the case may be, right? So I do feel like we are overstretched militarily, and it's a good idea to kind of pull that back a little. And so I don't really have a problem with that. It seems like this concern about having conversations with Russia, I don't know why that's such a problem. Like, I think it's fine to have a conversation with Russia. Now, what the final terms are, that is where you can have an argument of like, hey, what did you ultimately agree to? Do we agree to that? Is that something that's reasonable? Right. But just having conversations, like there's this uproar about people having about Donald Trump and the administration having conversations with Russia. Like that is a major nuclear power in the world. And we should be having a dialogue with them, and it doesn't have to be a nice dialogue, but we should at least be talking to them to make sure that they don't feel like they're in a position to have to leverage the fact that they're a nuclear power, because they are, and that could be problematic. And just to say, oh well, Europe is also going to have a nuclear arsenal on the edge of its territory. That doesn't. I, I mean, France has like 206 nuclear warheads, like 206. Like Russia has 5,600 nuclear warheads. 5,600. Like that's insane. Like not even a close comparison. Like you really want to? I don't know. You want to? I don't understand. Well, like, what are you doing? Like, I get that you want to kind of show that there's strength here, and I get all that, but to just call like it does, you can't have a conversation with someone if you're calling them Hitler. I mean, would you have a conversation with someone if someone like came to you and said, "Hey, listen, I don't like the fact that you're behaving like Hitler right now, and I need you to stop being Hitler." Like, how are you gonna have? No one's gonna have a conversation with you. Like, you're not gonna have a conversation with anyone who talks to you like that. So, like, there should certainly be conversations happening as to what hey, you want to get into the nuts and bolts of like what they agree to. We can argue that. Like, that is the thing that's worth arguing about. But definitely have conversations. Why would you not want to have a conversation with a nation like Russia? Like, I'd want to have a conversation with Russia, Iran, North Korea. Those guys are we don't know what they are capable of. Like, we don't know. Like, I'm sure you guys have heard, like, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Remember that? That's a thing. That's a real thing. Like, you want to know what they're thinking. Where are they at? Where I kind of, like, we need to see that. Like, I think it's good for us to have that conversation. So I don't know. I feel like it's just everything that the administration does can't be wrong. I'll just put it that way. It can't be everything. Every single thing the administration does is wrong. It can't be that. I mean, I didn't like a bunch of shit that Biden administration did, but I can't say that everything they did was wrong. They did some good stuff. They did some bad stuff, or at least stuff I didn't agree with. But to just blanketly say, "Oh, everything the Democrats and Joe Biden did was just wrong," is not a good position to have. Just like it's not a good position to say everything that Donald Trump does and the Republicans do is wrong. That's a silly position to have. Like it's just ridiculous position. Like you just can't. I mean, that's not a realistic position. Like why would anyone have that position? And I don't feel, I guess what I'm trying to get to is I don't feel like the majority of people, like individuals, think that way. I feel like that is something that we see in our little box, but we don't really, like, you and I, like, if we're having a conversation, we don't think like that. Like who thinks like that? Like, you think that everything the people on the other side of the aisle is just wrong? Independents are just wrong? Like, no one thinks like that. No one thinks in black and white like that. I mean, when you really get down to it. Now, if you're just doing talking points, yeah, that's what it's going to sound like. It's going to sound like, you know, they're just talking their talking points and they're not thinking about their position. They're just regurgitating information. And that's where it starts sounding very much like, oh, this person is a ridiculous person. But when, like, people who are like thoughtful about what they're talking about, even if they are, maybe the information they have is not correct, but if they're thoughtful about it, they don't usually just go and say, hey, well, everything that the other side is saying is wrong, right? If you don't agree with me, if you're not with me, you're against me. The only people who think like that are like the politicians in in the parties. Both sides are like that. Like Republican, Democrat, you hear that on both sides, right? A lot of people are just like, I'm going to be an independent because I just can't be so polarized, right? Um, but I don't know. Been there's a lot going on. I want to kind of get that off my chest. I think that I feel like there is a lot more optimism in like what we can do as people in this nation than what we see on the news. There's definitely things to be concerned about. There's definitely things that I think are going to have a dramatic change in the way that we operate as a country. These tariffs certainly look like they're going to be impactful. Like if we indeed stay involved with the tariffs, right? If those tariffs stay, um, you know, but a lot of what I'm seeing is it's a lot of like shaking things up in a way that I think will have a net benefit because it will one it's a different approach than we've seen in the past because we've been seeing business as usual and nothing has been changing. I feel like we can agree on that. I feel like that's something that we can generally agree on. Like, hey, business as usual has been happening for decades, and it seems like it's getting worse. Things are just getting worse, right? Business as usual has been happening and it seems like things are getting worse, so we got to change business as usual. So we've certainly changed business as usual. It's not business as usual. So I like that. I think that there is a net benefit to that, potentially. I don't know for sure, but I think there's a net benefit to that because it's going to get us as the people more involved in what's going on so that we'll be more likely to be engaged in who ultimately is making decisions that are going to ultimately impact us. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a benefit on that side of things. And I'm hopeful that some of the things that are being implemented are going to also have a net benefit to us as a people. And that's what's being argued right now, whether or not that's going to be the case. So I don't I don't I don't know that I have a strong position on either side. I totally understand both sides of the argument. I think I'm just naturally optimistic that the things that are being implemented, while there's likely to be some pain that's going to come out of a lot of this stuff, I feel like there's a good potential for things to go well, especially considering that we saw some of these tariffs that were implemented back in 2018, and the economy did not have like a crazy it didn't go down. Like it's not like, oh, we did these tariffs and then now everything went to shit. That didn't happen. So it actually improved. So the deficit was I guess the only glaring issue, and that's before COVID. So, that's not where the deficit spending went to. So, definitely there was a deficit issue. So, that would, I'm not sure what the cause of that is. I'd have to do some more homework on it. But that was the only thing that was negative. Everything else got better. So, I mean, if you did something before and things got better, why would you think if you do it again, things wouldn't get better? So while I understand the position of, hey, by doing this, this could really negatively impact um, the economy and can cause all kinds of problems. When it was done before, it seemed like the economy performed okay. Like it didn't have this crazy negative impact. So, and I'm really talking from a position of ignorance because I'm not an economist, and there may be some nuanced elements that I'm totally missing, and I totally respect that. If there are, please share that in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Anyways, if you guys like what you're hearing, please like, please share, all that good stuff. My name's Gus. This is the Ortiz Anomaly podcast. If there's any particular topics that you want me to kind of talk about or bring any guests on to talk about, please make sure you comment below and just let me know if you have any questions. I mean, I'll answer them best I can, but I'm just a guy, so don't expect me to be like some crazy expert. So I'm just I'm here. I'm American, just trying to figure all this shit out and giving my 2 cents on what I'm seeing. So I hope you like this. Thank you guys. Please share. I don't know what else to say. Thank you for your time. I'll talk to you guys next time. Peace.